Hey, what up, it's your boy Nick. So, Mr. Enter is a media review commentary channel who has had a mixed reputation. For nearly 10 years he's been doing commentary, with viewership currently around 20 to 70,000 on average. Just Stop released a fantastic critique of his channel that mentioned a lot of overarching problems that he sees with Enter's content, from poor editing and inconsistent quality, and there's even a phrase that people in the commentary community would say of just don't be a Mr. Enter, because of the connotations with how poor some of his videos were just structured. A lot of the critiques still hold up to this day, especially with the lapse in thumbnail quality. Like for this one, it isn't even the right aspect ratio. You can't even read the text because it's cropped in bright green. But beyond general issues, I want to talk about a movie review he did recently that caught the eyes of all of Twitter, causing an outpour of meme content for its surface level obscurity, which can comedically be summed up as Turning Red needs more 9/11. While current day he insists that it was a publicity stunt used to bring attention to his channel alongside with overplayed outrage and surface level arguments, some see that as a cop-out. I also see it as a cop-out, as he's had some pretty bad takes before, but you know what? He says it best. Good to know after a career of insulting people, getting things blatantly untrue, going into anti-mask rants, this is your moral line. This is the moment where you say too far, when I thought a mediocre movie didn't properly represent its stated year. And considering the absolutely impassioned speech of a tweet thread that followed that, he's at least a little sore that his review didn't get the reaction he was looking for. At the very end, we'll do a dramatic reading because, oh my god. But without further ado, let's get into the critique of the 9/11 Turning Red review.
I'm going to start with what held me back from actually enjoying the movie, and that is May's mother, Ming. I'm going to be dead straight with you. I hated this character so much that I thought I would have to stop watching the movie. Every time that Ming was on screen, I was angry. Every time Ming was on screen, this was some of the most uncomfortable a Disney Pixar film has ever made me feel. And need I remind you that this is a film about puberty, in which the problem is solved with twerking. So, defenders will rush and say that this behavior is accurate, especially in Asian communities. Asian communities are definitely at least stereotypically strict in upbringing. So, pardon my ignorance. Is it realistic to take a child's drawing of a crush, drag her down to a convenience store, and confront the person in said drawing in a store full of people? Is it really realistic to try and directly give menstrual pads to someone and not leave them with a nurse at school? Ming's behavior is too over the top. Actually, no, it's not. That's actually the problem. The problem is that it's realistic. It's something that could feasibly happen if you were one of the worst, most brain-dead people on Earth.
Mr. Enter's main issue with the movie is the mother Ming, who he describes as a psychotic helicopter mom with no justification for her actions, and that it's not a valid representation of how people just are. His statement switches from her being too over-the-top and hyperbolicized to being too realistic and plausible. You certainly can argue that Ming is a flawed character, and generational trauma is certainly the theme of the moment, but I also want to note that parents like Ming are far more common than you'd assume. In my personal life, I actually have a friend whose mother, she would literally call all of his friends when he wasn't answering his phone, even if she knew he was at work, me included, despite the fact that she hates my guts. She classes with his girlfriend so much that when they moved and asked, hey, we don't want you to know our address, his mother stalked him to find his new address. By the way, he's 24. So it's not unheard of, but I will say that this movie actually didn't do a great job of fitting the bill to give that explanation. Ming's character is clearly filled with self-consciousness stemming from childhood issues with her parents, but we're never actually shown those issues. Not once do we actually get a scene of how the mother in any way could have projected behavior on Ming that wasn't justified. She was 80 feet tall. So it really seems out of the blue for a character like Ming to be so vastly obsessive. Showing more personability throughout would have really helped her more, or more anecdotes about her past, just so the audience can have a little bit more empathy towards her.
Part of the Ming problem actually comes from the movie's style. It is a very much in your face, and takes a lot of cues from anime. This movie really feels like it was made for the TikTok generation. I mean, it was, obviously, it was released in 2022, but the movie also takes place in 2002, and that creates many problems with the film. The movie also overestimates how common cell phone use was among middle schoolers at the time. It wasn't until the mid to late 2000s when cell phones became a common thing in middle schools. Like, unless the family was rich, even the adults at the time would be using beepers. The anime style also feels off due to the time period. While anime did exist in the West, obviously, besides Sailor Moon or Dragon Ball, Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh!, it was pretty niche until like 2005. But it wasn't the styling of the time. Speaking of which, by 2002, boy bands were on the way out.
Thematic Issues. The movie is set in 2002, a fact that's only referenced a handful of times, and you could easily miss it if you weren't looking for it. I had no idea this movie was set in a specific date, but Enter takes issues with the elements that he considered unrealistic for that specific time, such as the overuse of cell phones for kids, the fact that there still exists a teen pop band at the time after Justin Timberlake went solo, making the end of teen band era, so for 4town to exist is just blasphemous. Generally, he discredits a lot of the movie for their usage being inconsistent with the real day 2002, which is such a weird concept to me. This movie is set at a time where the main demographic who's watching this movie may have never even lived in that year. Having elements beyond 2002 is absolutely fine because most people still consider these things relics. I didn't have one of those types of phones until I was like 6, and I still felt like a huge wave of nostalgia just seeing it on the screen because I was like, oh my god, that's the kind of phone I used to have when I was a kid. I've never gone into a movie and said, oh my god, you know what, wait a minute. That item that the character is using wasn't released until November of the next year. That is not realistic. This guy must get so easily upset from every piece of media he consumes.
Oh yeah, there's also the puberty thing. It is really underplayed and the controversy is blown mega out of proportion. You're not going to get much besides menstrual pads. And this is something that I'm getting really tired of happening because it's so daring, so brave. You know, like how they add in a literal gay wink and a nudge. You want animation that's daring? Watch Braceface. That show actually had a period episode. Cartoons were more daring and diverse back then, and definitely more than the industry does today. Not so much with films, but actual on-television animation, yes. It was probably more diverse back then than it is now, even. You want to talk Asian characters animation? American Dragon Jake Long, Life and Time of Juniper Lee. I'm not going to give easy credit for things that have already been done and done better 20 years ago. But if you want to keep giving credit to a mega corporation that stole your values and is trying to sell them back to you, keep on praising every little scrap of things that they will keep removing for an international market.
There's this weird dissonance between claiming the outrage of the period inclusion is overplayed, which it is. It definitely is. Like, people were really mad about that for some reason, which is really weird. But at the same time, going on this, like, mini rant that it wasn't daring enough to receive the amount of praise that it did. Like, people shouldn't be happy to see the small amounts of inclusion because Disney is, quote-unquote, taking your values and selling them back to you. Because he's saying that cartoons that were actually in 2002 were so much more daring and open, which is super silly. I'm not going to compare a niche cartoon to the largest media corporation in the world. I agree. In terms of cultural, LGBT, and even just representation, Disney has done its best to stay as squeaky clean, only dipping its toes into the water of inclusivity and making us beg for it. Because it doesn't want to touch on anything that's not universally marketable. Turning Red is not that. Turning Red is the culmination of a group of women fighting it tooth and nail to see their experiences reflected back into the world in their own unique way that can be empathized by a lot of girls current day. Well, yes, there's a cartoon way back when that had a whole episode about periods, holy fuck. But I personally can't think of a single cartoon growing up that even made mention of periods in a way that wasn't the butt of a PMS joke. Seeing a supportive yet albeit oppressive mom do her absolute best to be there for a child in an experience felt by literally all menstruating people, literally 50% of the population, it is just a nice thing because of the weight that time actually carries for some people. Not everyone has parents that are that supportive. Not everyone has that experience. It literally sucks. It is the beginning of a 60-year decline. I know that scene will have at least impacted someone. And knowing how the writers had to fight so hard to make that happen, it makes it all the more special, and at least give them some freaking credit. And now it's time for the main events.
This film takes place less than a year after the September 11th terrorist attacks. I bring this up because it radically altered the culture of the time, in ways that make this movie feel exceptionally ignorant of the time. Even though, literally, the only reason I can comprehend that this movie is set explicitly in 2002 is because the director grew up in that exact year. Yes, this film takes place in Canada, not the United States, but all over the Western world. Canada, America, the UK, much of Europe. People were paranoid. It was the major theme of the decade. I mean, I can understand not wanting everyone to be so fearful, as that goes against the tone that the movie is trying to establish. But then you have very awkward moments if you actually were there and you do actually remember the time period. Like, the moment with Ming, this strange adult standing outside of the school with a box. In real world, she would be tackled by the police and hauled in. 1999. I could buy the in-your-face attitude, the boy band stuff. And on top of that, the movie doesn't get anything at all by setting itself in 2002. But taking place in just a vague, unspecified time, like any other Disney Pixar film, would have done this one so much favor.
Mr. Enter himself states that this movie is basically made for Gen Z. And despite the phrasing, never forget, we're officially entering an age where kids of today have little to no recollection of the attack. Most Gen Z are born after it happened. It is also really odd to me that he's not only speaking for a very small community in Canada, but also argues the entire world was on edge, it had restrictions, security skyrocketed because of it. While that may be true, speaking for every country and every community across the world really just isn't the move. Like, yes, things changed, but it mostly changed for the adults. 13-year-olds have a lot of different shit on their minds than a tragedy that happened in this movie a year ago. He states that because of the high security risk that was bound to happen, there's no way Ming could have disguised herself without being lugged away by a cop car when she was sneaking around the outside of school, ignoring the fact that this story of her sneaking to school is a direct anecdote from the director Dong Shi experiencing at age 13 in the year 2002. This actually happened to someone. Holy cow, it's almost like our experiences can be subjective and not affected by large-scale world events. Oh my god. As far as the prevalence, to me, the only connection I have is we stood in silence for a minute whenever the anniversary passed. I can't imagine kids born after me would be throwing up their hands at the historical inaccuracy that may or may not have affected this small Chinese community in fucking Canada. And the idea that the carefree nature of literal preteens would only be understandable if it were like any other year. Like, do you remember 1999? I guess there was like a Y2K. Everyone was scared of their like, phones being shut off and planes falling out of the sky. Like that was, I feel like that would probably impact the movie a lot more. Wikipedia will give you a long list of movies that are set in 2002. Many more of them are for adults, and I wager, how many of them do you really think makes mention of September 11th? This critique fucking baffles me. After the last few years especially, we have gone through tragic event after tragic event that legit actually affected everyone in the world. I think it's fair to say we do not want a reminder or homage to a tragedy that happened 20 years ago when we just had a bunch of tragedies happen 2 years ago. I think that's fair. A perfect example of this is South Park, who for a while tried really hard to stay up to date with everything that was happening. Every episode would be aligned with a lot of the tragedies that were happening because they thought it was going to be a funny homage, but it just got worse and worse and worse because 2020, every single month, something awful happened. And the increasing need for escapism, the audience was just getting battered. They just couldn't leave. They just couldn't escape it. It sucked. It was a horribly awful year. And eventually South Park had to make the executive decision of, this is lame. This sucks. We need to back ourselves out of having this. So they literally made an episode where they time traveled so COVID never happened in their universe so they can just stop fucking referencing it. Overall, I like the movie, okay? I think it entertained me for like an hour and 40 minutes, and you know what, that was pretty cool. I have my critiques of it, and that's completely valid, and I think his review could have been worse. You know, there are definitely things that I do also agree with, because he can say that this was a publicity stunt, but I don't know about that one. I think he just kind of said that because I would also feel a little embarrassed if my review was so bad Forbes wrote an article about it. Like, I would also kind of backtrack a few steps. And also publicity stunts don't also turn off the comments, because usually you're trying to farm that outrage, rake in that engagement and interaction and boost it in the algorithm because everyone's outraged and they're commenting a lot, you know. I don't know, maybe I just don't know how to farm outrage right. But right now, what is a better way to end this video than reading the absolutely impassioned tweet thread that followed the Twitter reaction, because literally this solidifies Mr. Enter's legacy as being the turning red 9/11 guy. He's known for other things, but this is how I choose to remember him. If reading 10 really upset tweets in my interpretation of how he like speaks does not interest you, that's completely valid, and that's fine. Like, have a lovely rest of your day, go get some hot chocolate, and I bid you adieu. But also, before you go, this video is pretty much a test of short form analysis and critique content, and I'm usually a lot more reserved, and if that's something that you guys enjoy, do let me know. Please let me know if you like this kind of style of content, this setup, and if you would like more videos like this. This was actually very fun and easy to make, and I want to be able to put out more quick videos because I do have a lot more long form content that's going to take a long time. time, so being able to push out these videos would actually be a lot of fun. But let me know how you liked it. And for all of those who choose to stay for the dramatic reading, let's get started. I'm only doing one recording of this. If I fuck up, it's on record. Keep fighting the good fight. Even if you have to take things out of context, you look phenomenal doing so, and I'm sure Disney knows that they've got loyal customers that'll ignore them working with despotic governments as they sell your values back to you. In a way, it was satisfying to piss Twitter off. Why? Because the little shits I had to deal with, actual hate forums, were less toxic and pathetic than the community here. Good luck with that Elon Musk buyout. Elon Musk is actually no longer buying Twitter. I hear you guys loved him too when he stood for the right things. Remember when you guys loved J.K. Rowling for queerbaiting? Only ever saying that her characters were LGBT after the fact. I could go on and on. The names change, but the stories, they stay the same. Gets fucking old, and people in general are getting tired of your excrement. Ew. I pity those of you, fuck you, who live your life on this cesspool of a platform. It's been dying for a long time. The brief boost of relevance it got due to the pandemic is over, and all those fake Twitter points you've been hunting for will vanish, just like any shits I had left to give. Say what you want about me or my videos, I don't care. I've lost too much over the past couple years due to the fucking real problems to give a shit about better eating at teehees. Whatever happens today, I'm still gonna make content and I'm still gonna live my best. I turned off comments on that video, but maybe I shouldn't have. If being part of a trip data is only the only way I could practice that miserable life for a brief bit, it's just who am I to think that from you? Could that be weird, but it doesn't matter. If it wasn't for that, we'd be making this about the diversity talk. The fact that we're not talking about that is how I know most of the people didn't watch the full review. Justifying yourself with people who don't listen is pointless. And hey, maybe when I review Mulan 2020, She-Ra, Hard Guardian Spice, and Masters of the Universe, I'll hit trending again. Meaning, do you guys really want to make me more successful? Hints for upcoming projects, by the way. I'm not going to shut up, ever, despite my own good. Rule of thumb, if you piss Twitter off, you're probably doing something good. And more. Once again, after a career of moral faux pas and stupidity, no. This is the one where you've finally gone, no. In the eternal words of Rick Sanchez, your boos mean nothing and I know what makes you. Take a deep breath and practice self-care. I love you all and hope that we can build a better world together, devoid of hatred, fear, and anger of the yesteryear. I'm gonna listen to some country music and go work on my next video. Have a lovely day and God bless. Dash John. Oh my god, he literally wrote all that out and hit post.